The US space agency, NASA, is worried an air leak at the International Space Station could lead to a catastrophic failure. SpaceNews.com says NASA and its Russian equivalent Roscosmos disagree over the cause of the leak in the Russian part of the space station and over how serious the problem is. Russian scientists believe the facility can still be operated safely.
Spacewalk 10 days from now on April 28th, we'll see these two cosmonauts.
Keith Cowing is the editor of NASAWatch.com. He joins me now from Washington, D.C. Welcome, Keith. An air leak at the ISS, that sounds dangerous, but this isn't the first time we're hearing about it, is it?
No, and I actually, back in the day, helped design the space station, and leaks are something you always expect, but they're usually small. You can normally repair them, and you bring more air up and recycle it anyways. But this is an issue with an older space station. Some of the modules are 30 years old almost. So it's what you can expect from an old car, and it becomes a problem the longer it goes unfixed.
So do tell us, how much air is leaking out and how quickly does it need to be replaced?
Well, it's a couple pounds a day, and what's happening here, if I can take things on my desk here, you have the Russian service module, which is one of the very first things that was launched, and it has an area where other spacecraft dock to it, and the rest of the space station is here. And when the spacecraft dock, they have to go through this tunnel. That's where the leak is. And they're not exactly sure. The Russians think it's, something you can deal with. And the Americans are thinking, it's a bit of a problem. And it's kind of like taking this paper clip and just bending it until it breaks. That's what they're worried about, is that the connection between these modules might break at an inopportune time and the air will rush out. So that's not a good thing to have happen. But they're not exactly in agreement as to how to fix it.
Well, the air leak is in the Russian section of the space station, so doesn't Roscosmos know best in this case?
You would think, and I'm not going to, it is rocket science, but sometimes you look at things that have never been seen before, like a 30-year-old spacecraft, and there's differing opinions, and you can deal with it, but the thing is, it's one thing to deal with a leak. Like if you have a leak in a roof in your house, you can say, well, I'm not going to go in that room. But if the roof is about to collapse, that's another issue. And they haven't really decided on that yet, but it is a Russian module, but it's attached to an international space station, and the air in that space station belongs to everyone.
And why is it so difficult to repair this leak?
Well, they've done some things, but again, I've had friends who've lived up there, and they've said that if you look down it's a long thing of cylinders. It actually moves a little bit every time that the solar panels move, so it's always in motion. And so you've got to deal with something. It's sort of like open heart surgery. You don't want to kill the patient has to be alive while you're fixing it. But in some cases, the hardware may be too old, but it's in a very important location. So they're a little bit perplexed as to exactly how to deal with this. So come back next week. There'll be another discussion.
Well, let's say for some reason this can't be repaired. What would the alternative be? To abandon ship?
Well, no, because you can always separate the module. There are some ways that you could deal with it. You could just, there's a hatch inside that you could just seal. This is what they do now. When they're not using that tunnel, they just close it off. You could just close that off and never open it again and not use that docking port. That would kind of solve the problem. But it's one thing to solve the problem. It's the other to understand why it's happening. That's what people are scratching their heads about. So I don't think they're going to abandon the space station, but they do have to deal with this.
That's fascinating stuff. From Keith Cowing, editor of NASAWatch.com. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.